Let's go.
Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. I'm your host, David Horsager. Join me as I sit down with influential leaders from around the world to discuss why leaders and organizations fail, top tactics for high performance, and how you can become an even more trusted leader.
Today's show is sponsored by Sourcewell.
Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. It's David Horsager. I've got a special episode today. He's been an executive at Hilton Worldwide, the Hilton Hotels. He's been a brand strategist with St. Jude Hospitals. He's been an entrepreneur, a CEO. He's run a nonprofit. Amazing guy. We've got some great things to talk about today. Thank you for being with us today, Calvin Stovall.
Oh, man, Dave, thank you so much, man. I'm excited to be here. Truly honored, man. Thank you. It's great to see you.
And you know
again.
what? We've been friends, and you're down in North Carolina. You moved away from me in Minnesota. You're in the warm place, but let me tell you, it's warm today in Minnesota, too.
That's rare.
Hey, let's get started. I want to get into your framework and some of the things you're doing and just talk about leadership a little bit. Before I do, what are a couple things we need to know about Calvin Stovall? What are you passionate about? I know you got a couple kiddos. What are a couple things we should know to get started?
Oh, awesome, man. Yeah, I do have two boys that I'm raising now, man. They're actually 11 and one will be turning 14 next month. So I'm having fun with those guys. They're eating me out of house and home, but I'm loving it. But other than that, man, I'm just passionate about, helping people, inspiring people, help them reach their full potential. I am a true blue hospitality person. Most of my career has been in the hospitality industry. Started as a desk clerk up into, being an executive with Hilton Worldwide. So, I'm truly focused on helping companies become more customer centric, on creating memorable customer experiences and things of that nature, and really inspiring leadership to, really motivate and empower people to deliver those memorable experiences, whatever it is that they do, because I think that's just so essential.
Well, we're going to come back around at the end of the podcast to you personally and some other thoughts around that, how you lead yourself and those kind of things. But let's jump in because you created a framework, all your experience with everything from Hilton Hotels to, your brand strategy work and all this. I think it's really fascinating. You created a framework for becoming iconic. And in my mind, as you know, with everything we talk about here, it's like becoming trusted, right? Trusted leaders.
Yes.
Trusted
Absolutely.
brands. And what I like about it, and we've talked about this before, but when you talked about even what it is to be iconic, it's not just stand out like some people think. It was also being relevant, and it was having longevity. So it's not just, iconic isn't just like, oh, amazing for a moment. It's got longevity, and we love that because that says a whole lot about trust. But tell me what you mean by iconic before we jump into the framework.
Okay, awesome. Well, when I talk about iconic, I think you described it very well, Dave. It's short and simple. It's about relevancy and how do you keep yourself relevant? Basically, how do you stay in the marketplace and continue to evolve because things change all the time? And how do you continually evolve and keep your customers engaged and also keep your employees engaged? Because that's a critical part of becoming iconic. It's got to be both. I'm a proponent of you can't have a great customer experience unless you have a great employee experience, and they both work hand in hand. So that's when I talk about iconic. You got to have all of that.
And if you're being iconic, like you've helped a lot of brands become iconic, or that's what you're helping people do. And what about individuals?
Oh, absolutely. This framework, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll just say, Dave, 2020 was a pivotal year for a lot of people. A lot of people were still trying to figure things out. A lot of people had to pivot, really change how they were, just their mindset and how they were approaching things. And so this framework works for a brand or an organization, but it also you can turn it inward to help you thrive during uncertainty. So basically during 2020, a lot of my virtual experiences, or not too many live events anyway, but the virtual ones were really about helping people be able to embrace the unknown, how they can better pivot and change their mindset and be able to thrive in times when you really didn't know what to do next. So this framework really can kind of help you do that as well.
Let's jump into the framework. This is going to help a lot of people today, and I think whether you're a leader, and what I love about it is, we've got the 8 pillars of trust, the framework for building trust. But
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of overlap here on how to become iconic. It's really a lot about how do I become trusted by being relevant and lasting, and a whole lot of what you're going to talk about. So let's take a look, first of all, and over where it's a 4-quadrant framework. People, trusted leaders out there can think about this. How do we, give us an overview, and then let's go into them a little bit so people have something they can take away tomorrow morning.
Okay, awesome. The first quadrant, Dave, is to be unique. And we all know from a brand standpoint, you have to have some level of differentiation to stand out. But turning this inward is really about finding your why. What is your purpose, right? And what gets you up and gets you jazzed every single day. I believe everybody has a gift, and everybody has something that they can contribute to the world. But you gotta figure what that is. And once you have that, that's the anchor of everything. The other 3 quadrants surround that. And then when you're talking about a company, it's gotta be right. It's gotta be about more than just money and profitability, right? It's gotta be a higher purpose so people can rally around that. And it's the same as a person. You wanna have something that you're rallying around every day. What gets you fired up? I call them blue diamonds. And I call them blue diamonds. They're kind of core values, basically. Your blue diamonds are, and I call them blue diamonds because blue diamonds are rare. You can only find them 3 places in the world: India, Australia, and I believe in South Africa. But I like to use blue diamonds. What is your blue diamond or diamonds? What makes you different than everybody else? What are your gifts? So that whole be unique is all around that. And again, that can be a company or looking at yourself.
Let's take an example. Let's take this bite by bite. I like this a lot. Let's take maybe an example. What would have been when you were working with, let's say, Hilton Hotels? What's unique? You got Marriott, you got this, you got that. What was as we all stay in these hotels, what would have been something that would differentiated them compared to others? And I know you were especially driving results on one big brand, but what would be how would I think about it if I can anchor to a brand like you worked with? Was there examples there for Hilton?
Yeah, absolutely. What Homewood had that was very different, and I guess you would say our Goliath was Residence Inn. We were a small brand. Homewood was small. Homewood Suite was a small brand at the time. We had like 35. Residence Inn had about 200 plus or whatever. So they had the distribution we didn't have. But what we did have was the highest guest satisfaction ratings in that segment. So we had that, and our product was top notch.
Why was it? What made it different? What made it unique?
First of all,
why do you think they said it was
better?
It
was the people. It was the experience that we created for them.
So how did you create people? Because you got the same people, different places. What was different about them?
Well, I think that we really communicated with them all the time, and we talked about what the brand stood for, and we exemplified that in all of our communications. We talked about it and everything, because every year we had an annual meeting. We made sure that the leaders did their huddles with their team. We inspired all of the leaders themselves to know how important their engagement was to the employees' engagement. So we understood that people emulate and mirror what they see. So we focused a lot on the importance of leadership, because the product is the product. Anybody can copy the product. Even though we were a newer brand, people could put in new carpet, they can paint the walls, they can do all that stuff. But we knew if we had the right leadership in place, Dave, and we knew that those leaders were inspiring that team to create those experiences that guests would talk about and tell their friends and relatives and colleagues about, we knew we could win.
You can copy the product. You can copy the product. You can't copy the experience.
There it is.
I love that.
That's
you
it.
can copy the product, but not the experience. That's what we've got to create. So let's get an example personal. Maybe it's yours. Maybe it's a leader you know. What's an example of a real blue diamond for you?
That's a good question. A blue diamond for me is really something different that I like to bring is my passion. And that is, I bring my whole self to any project that I do. And so when I talk to clients or anybody that I'm communicating with, you will know Calvin is in the game. Okay, I'm in the game, and you will see it on my face. You will see it in my body actions and my body language and everything. And I truly believe people are inspired by people that communicate that way. And I just know that. Could you imagine, Dave? You know, you've been doing this for a long time, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of speakers. I have too. And some stand out from others. And typically, the passion and the fire that comes off the platform inspires people in the audience. And so my blue diamond for me is spreading that passion. And that's a core about me. Hey, bring your best self to everything you do. And, you know, and although some things may not work out, you gave it your best shot. And that to me is enough.
I love it. So your uniqueness, one of them, and I know it firsthand, is your passion and your authenticity, by the way. There's people that look passionate and it's not authentic, right?
Yeah.
Let's go to the next quadrant. Yeah.
It's funny you brought that up. That's the second quadrant.
Yeah. All right. There we go.
Be authentic.
Second quadrant is be authentic.
That's the second quadrant. And that is all about connectedness. And what I mean by connectedness, and if we're talking about a company, is connectedness around your customers, understanding their needs, their wants, having empathy in their journey and things of that nature, and also having connectedness with your team. I think you can't accomplish the vision that you're trying to accomplish without your team being connected to that. And that is through communication and showing that you truly care about their well-being, XYZ. Turning it inward, be authentic, is all about being yourself and being comfortable in your own skin. And that is, you know, I think sometimes people feel like they have to morph into something else to be accepted. And I like the idea of you being happy being you. And so, you know, like I said, everybody's different, and embrace your difference. I know some people hear all the time, hey, look, you don't fit in. You're not a cultural fit. And I don't like cultural fit, because cultural fit means everybody's got to be the same to me. I like cultural add, because your experiences, your background, the things that you bring that are unique to you, that's you, that's your brand, that's your authenticity. And I think that's important to bring to any company or anything, you know, your relationships, because people want to know. I mean, people should embrace your differences, and I think that's important.
Hey, it's Ann with the Trust Edge team here. As you know, we are passionate about helping you and your team perform at your best. And that's why David wrote his new book, Trusted Leader. This true-to-life parable follows the story of a CEO who uncovers the root issue threatening his organization's success. And in the back half of the book, David provides a roadmap for even how to solve those root issues. Get Trusted Leader for your team, your organization, or even just for yourself at trustedleaderbook.com.
How can I tell if a company's authentic as a brand? What's that look like?
Well, if everybody,
maybe an example.
To me, if I look at all your leadership and they all look the same, to me, that's not being authentic, because authenticity to me is caring about other people's backgrounds, experiences, and things of that nature. So you should have a diverse team, because that brings diverse voices, that brings diverse ideas. That leads to the iconic status, because that's the only way you can do that. So you have to, some organizations, you can tell if they have a myopic view of things, you become bland, you become boring. And sometimes you're stagnant. But if you have authenticity, you're being true to who you are as a brand, you're thinking of other people's values and experiences and caring about what other people bring to the table. To me, that's an authentic company, because that shows that you have really truly branched out and really want to embrace other people's things that they bring. And some organizations, I think, probably are not like that.
What would you say to this, though? I hear what you're saying, and I agree in many ways. Would you say everyone's a fit? Can everybody be a fit of every, let's say, culture?
I would say, well, if it depends. I would say you can be, if you're a cultural ad, you can fit into an organization, but it depends on the type of organization we're talking about. So if you go to an organization and you go in for an interview, Dave, and you ask the right questions, or you're sitting there and you're watching and you never see anybody that looks like you, or you see everybody as all white male, or you see no females in leadership, or you see there are cues that you could say, well, if that's the kind of company you're looking for, if you're looking for a company that is authentic or is going to embrace differences, that might not be the company you want to be in. And I think now in the environment that we're in today, I think particularly with the younger generation, Gen Zs, millennials, they're looking for organizations that have that level of authenticity and diversity in it. I'm not saying it takes time to convert. If you're all like looking the same now, that's going to take time. But I think you have to, first of all, be aware that there's an issue here and then start making some changes. Can't happen overnight, but you have to be able to embrace that and realize that, hey, things have changed. Maybe we need to change our mindset a little bit and start doing things a little bit differently. And that I believe that's how you connect to people. And that's why that whole connectedness is important, because if people see that and they know that their voice is going to be heard and their differences are going to be valued and the experiences that they bring is going to be help the organization move forward. I love that. That's why I love brainstorming sessions. You should have a diverse group of people in there offering ideas. And I just believe that will help you get to the best solution. But in a lot of organizations, if you have, when you're trying to be innovative, as they say, and they'll have brainstorming sessions, but who's in those sessions? Top tier people, senior people, but they rarely will talk to the line level employees and have them be involved, because typically they're closer to the customer too. And so, you want to make sure you have their voices as well. But I just think,
yeah. No, I just think there's a lot to go into here. I think it's a interesting world. What we've learned is, in fact, one of the biggest Harvard Putnam studies shows diversity, as an example, diversity of many kinds, not just color of skin, of many kinds tends to pit people against each other unless you increase trust.
Yes.
So you have to increase trust to do it. Now, how do we increase trust? Well, actually, our experience is you have to have certain commonalities to get the best out of diversity. So we have to have the same vision, let's say. We have to have the same unified purpose, let's say. So I'm just thinking about so in fact, that means for us at least, and we have this, smaller, relatively diverse company for our kind, type, love more always, but that we have to actually, to get the best out of diversity, even equity, inclusion, we actually have to have a sameness that cuts some people out, that shows they aren't, if they aren't about this kind of purpose, it's not it's actually not a color of skin thing or a different, certain kinds of diversity. It's a what it takes to serve our purpose, our clients, and our mission well does take some people out, and that's nothing to do with skin color or anything.
Right, exactly. Right?
But it does mean some people are not the right fit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In that case, you are absolutely correct.
Okay.
That is so true.
I want to get a clue from the expert. So because we want to be iconic.
That is true. And that is true. And that is that goes back to the why. That goes back to the why and the purpose. That's what everybody has to have that common. The core value, all that blue diamond, all that has to be common across the board.
You just got white diamonds. You're not on the same bus with our blue diamond folks.
Yes, right. You got to get on. So
let's jump to the third quadrant.
Yes, be passionate, and you know what that is all about. If we talk about a company or a leader, that's about leading by example, leading with vigor and vitality. Energizing and engaging and empowering and inspiring your team. So like I said before, I believe people mirror and emulate what they see. So I think 2020 was such a pivotal year for a lot of people. And particularly if you were in leadership, you had to be careful because, your employees are watching everything you do. And if you were the type of leader that was like, the sky was falling, oh, woe is me, with no optimism, that will rub off on your team. And of course, that would rub off on the customer experience, which is what you don't want to see happen. And so I think in this case, particularly, leaders that I like to call it pragmatic optimism. And why I call it that is people don't want a leader that has their head in the sand either and just say, you know what, I'm just going to ignore everything that's going around me, where the sky's wonderful, things are going to be great. No, that's not going to work. People want truth, but they also know that you can help and we together can get to a brighter future. I think there's a balance there. And so, that 2020 was a year where I think that and the connectedness was so important. If you were the type of leader and all you did was talk about, because a lot of people were working from home and all of that, if you're only focused on productivity, spreadsheets, all of that stuff, you missed the boat, because really the thing is you should have been talking more about people's self making sure they're taking care of themselves, you showing empathy for situations and things of that nature. Because now that we're coming out of this, trust me, people never forget. And they will know if you only cared about your numbers versus me as an individual.
We saw that for sure. We said we had a phrase around here: lead with empathy, lead the conversation with empathy, lead with something else that you talked about. Whether wherever it was inspired, probably your own brain, but it sure reminds me of some other truth. That pragmatic optimism piece. I love the balance of that, because you may or may not have heard the story, but I think it was, if I remember right, Admiral Stockdale was the highest-ranking prisoner of war in the Vietnam War, and excuse me, he was asked after people got out. He said he saw so many people die as prisoners of war, and it ached him so deeply. And then a reporter, I believe, or it might have even been Collins who interviewed him, and said, "What was it about those that died? Was there anything specific?" And he said, "It was the optimists. They all, said, they all thought, I'm going to get out by Christmas. I'm going to get out by Easter." And they just blinded themselves to the pragmatic part. And they just, and so this became known as the Stockdale paradox, that those actually that made it were actually able to first confront the brutal truth. And we saw this in the pandemic. Many people, like you said, put their head in the sand. Whatever, it's not happening, it's not real. Those that they were able to confront, this is real. We've got some issues. We got to deal with it. We got to empathize. We got to do this. But they did have it was a paradox, because that was balanced with a long-term optimism.
Yes.
A long-term hope. And so while they had to confront the truth, they also had long-term hope. And that's, I think, saying the exact same thing as what you found in your work, and that is pragmatic, not blind optimism, not just, hey, everything's going to be all right, the sun's shining, it's actually raining, but
exactly.
Right. So I think that's very interesting. Let's jump to the fourth quadrant of being iconic.
No, right. All right, Dave. This is probably, all of them are important, but I think this one's really critical. And that is the be consistent. And it's two points to this one. Focus on what matters most. Of course, you want to make sure you're focusing on your product and making sure you're being consistent and things of that nature. But the biggest thing for this quadrant is never becoming too comfortable or complacent. And so you don't want to be a Blockbuster or Circuit City or some of these other brands that didn't want to innovate, because of the situation. Everybody knows the situation with Blockbuster, when the guy came to him and told him about, hey, look, I want to do this Netflix thing. It was mail order at the time, and the guy that was, I think his name was John Antioco. I think that was his name. He was running Blockbuster at the time, and he told him, no, thank you. People are going to be renting these things for ages. I got this, and then they were bankrupt 10 years later. Same thing, Tower Records, same situation. Their owner, Russ Solomon, he just dismissed downloading music. So my whole thing here about this one is sometimes success can be a barrier to innovation. So you can become so comfortable that you lose sight of where things are headed. You don't want to, I love this term. People say you don't want to get Uberized, right? Because, Uber turned things upside, turned the taxi industry upside down. And so did Airbnb. Same thing with the hospitality industry. They weren't ready for that. And that's why I always encourage people, you have to watch your competitors. That's true. And I think that's you have to make sure and watch what they're doing. But it's typically when you get disrupted, it's usually not your competitor. It's somebody outside of your industry. So I always encourage people, look outside of the industry as well and what they're doing that's innovative that you can borrow.
How else can they do it? Yeah, because, it's like, okay, I didn't, we were taxis, taxi drivers, and they just didn't think about that positive. Like, there's no way someone's going to get in with a stranger. It's, people often tritely say, oh, just think outside the box. Well, it's not so easy to do it. It's like, okay, you at Hilton, worldwide, the market cap on Airbnb is magnificently higher with less than 2,000 employees than 5 million, Hilton properties that are magnificent. So something hit even Hilton, right? So how do we actually, we talk about innovation. I love this, by the way. Success is a barrier to innovation. That's totally true. We're doing well, but how do we actually keep pressing ourselves to innovate or see the next thing? Most people didn't see the pandemic coming. When I asked futurists, I had one of the top futurists on this show, top futurists in the world, and they can see certain things, but they don't see a lot of things. Is there any way to, actually get rid of the blind spots and see things in time?
Yeah. You know what? My thing is this, Dave, there are things that you can control and there's things that you can't. And I just tell people what gets most people frustrated is they're typically focusing on something that they have really no control over. So my recommendation to people is focus on the things you can control. And what you can control is to constantly keep learning. And have a curiosity mindset, because if you are always reading, and the thing is, what's great about the world we're in today, they've packaged learning in such a great way. I mean, they have podcasts now, you have TED Talks, you have audio books, you have a lot of things like that where you can leverage and take advantage of, but just continue to learn. And what it does is it helps you think differently. There's a lot of smart, bright people out here like yourself. And so, I think it just keeping that, when you're a child, like my boys, man, they're curious about everything. And as we get older, we feel like we know everything and, we've done everything and but that's not the case. And sometimes as leaders, we feel like we have to know everything, but you don't and you can't.
Right. We talked about this morning. We were actually filming on our Trust Edge pillar of competency. How do we stay fresh, relevant, and capable? And we talked about everything from, podcasts to coaching to masterminds to being a part of associations to having mentors to reading. You want a great new idea, read an old book, right? So there's a whole lot of ways we can stay fresh and relevant and capable. So how do we be iconic? Calvin Stovall, be unique. Be authentic, be passionate, be consistent. You have an example of a brand that's doing this or two?
Oh, wow, man. I think, and one of my favorite brands, and I know it's Chick-fil-A. And I know it's kind of fast food, but not really. But and I like them because they're simple, but they're always at the top of every food and beverage restaurant rating because they're consistent. Their product is good, but their people are just unique.
They're trained. Same kids are over at the other place, but these how did they learn to say my pleasure and keep a clean bathroom? Right? It was training.
That is a blue diamond. That's a core value that they have, and I just find that fascinating. Southwest Airlines is not like every other airline either. They train their people different. Their people are unique. The experience is different, Nordstrom's department stores, Ritz-Carlton, they understand the importance of creating experiences, but they've also empowered their people to create those experiences.
Hey, it's Sam from the Trust Edge team. Most training and development initiatives don't last or even solve the root issue hindering your organization. That's where Trust Edge coaching certification comes in. Trust Edge coaches are equipped with a suite of tools to identify, benchmark, and close gaps in trust for good. Because when you solve the real issue, you get measurable results in a culture where people actually want to make an impact. So whether you're a coach with your own clients or a leader training people inside your organization, check out trustedgecoaching.com and see how you can start solving the root issue and get lasting results in your business. And now back to the show.
Interesting, since you're in the hotel industry, or were, especially now with your consulting and speaking, still all over hospitality. But we had Horsager on, who was one of the founders of Ritz-Carlton, cool. And it was he who inspired Chick-fil-A to say "my pleasure," because that's what they did at the Ritz.
See?
Fascinating. Wow. And they said, well, we think that's a good idea. Let's just do what you do at the Ritz. Is that okay? Okay. So boom, all of a sudden, my pleasure goes across Chick-fil-A. We were joking last night with some friends. We wish that the Chick-fil-A drive-through folks, their system would be used by government and the licensing bureau, because our efficiency would go up immensely.
Oh my God, man. It's amazing with all of the things that's out here today. The government just they don't get it, man.
They're not incentivized to, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not incentivized to, when you're incentivized financially to be efficient, then there's some, we have to incentivize. It's just like our government in many ways and our media in many ways are incentivized against building trust. Yes. So all of a sudden we pay for, de-incentivization of trust. So what do we get? Less trust in government, less trust in media, and so forth. And that's why free enterprise in many ways is so good, because we incentivize effectiveness, and we actually incentivize what the customer wants. Some people think, of course, we're incentivizing making money, or we're incentivizing actually doing what's best for the customer, because if we don't take care of them better than anybody else, we don't get paid and feed our own children. So
I love it.
Anyway, that's a little side note that I'm sure I will get flack and critique for.
No, you won't, man. It was all true, you know?
Well, we'll try to stay on the side of truth in spite of critique. I often say, if you want to get critiqued for a living, my wiser older brother used to say this, the economist, you want to get critiqued for the living. He says we're in a more critical world than we've ever been in without the ability to critically think. And I say, if you want to get critiqued for a living, give a speech, write a book, or lead anything, right? Yeah. Somewhere people can sit in the cave and throw darts if you write a book or give a speech or have a podcast. There's something.
You got that right.
You wore the wrong tie. So, great. Well, I love it. Can you, we got to wrap this up. But before we do, is there any person that you say, boy, they live this out? Is there a leader that you see, and maybe we know them, maybe we don't, but is there any person that you think of, okay, because I know you help a lot of leaders, use this framework to, in essence, be iconic, to be relevant and last. But any example of someone in one part of this?
Yeah, man. I am a huge fan of John Maxwell, and I love John.
I was
Maxwell.
on stage with him last week.
What?
Yes, we were at Houston at World Series of Sales with 1,000 people or whatever. I was on right before him. It was a treat. So we got to hang out in the green room.
Man,
but
congratulations,
he also, not to one up anything, by the way, but my new book, Trusted Leader, he put his quote on a pivotal guide for today's leader. So I'm honored with that.
That's awesome, man.
We sit on an experts in residence at High Point and some other things. So
that's cool.
Interesting you said that.
Yeah, because that was just coincidental. But he is somebody that I have followed for a long time. I just like his authenticity. He's always passionate and very consistent. He's unique. He's iconic in my eyes, to me. One of the people that I admire.
Well, let's bring it to a little bit personal as we wrap toward the close. We talk in leadership, and I know you've been a leader in many organizations, from, as we talked about, the Hilton Groups to St. Jude's to nonprofit where you were a CEO, and now running your own organization where you teach this framework around the world.
Yes.
How do you lead yourself? You have any routines or things? I mean, you're trying to be a good dad, just like I'm trying to be. We hope that we're a bigger hero to those that know us the most than to people way out there in the audience. What do you do consistently, that last part of your framework, to lead yourself well?
Well, I am a believer, so I do spend time in the Word a little bit, enough to really strengthen myself, because it's tough out here, man. And sometimes you need to, that it is. And, like you said, people can critique you all the time. And so the Bible is a good source of energy for me. And it gives me, more inspiration to keep pressing. So I'm pretty consistent with that. I can always be better, but I'm pretty consistent with it. And self-care. I got to take care of myself, because I want to be here for my boys. And I love to have a high energy. And so I work out consistently and trying to eat better, and then my boys, man, my family, they're my guys. So, I want to make sure that they are just impactful citizens in the world, and of course be able to make their own decisions, but I want them to be gentlemen and scholars, as they say.
I love it. There you go, Shakespeare. He's a gentleman and a scholar. Oh, I love it. Hey, do you have one little takeaway, favorite resource or book right now these days that you're like, ooh, that right now this one's hitting me?
I have been on this Damon John kick for a while, and he has several books that he has, but I like his philosophy, his whole hustle philosophy. And he's kind of, I know he's on that show and all of that, but his books are really kind of grassroots. And so I like his approach to things, and him having been with FUBU and how he brought that up. I just love that whole hustle mentality. So I've been on his coattail a little bit for the last several months. So he's kind of been a guy I've been following quite a bit lately.
Love it. Hey, this has been a treat. We've got one final question we ask everybody on the show. Before we do that question, where can we find out everything about you, your framework, and your podcast? You've got iconicpresentations.net. We'll have all this linked in the show notes. So everybody just look at the show notes, iconicpresentations.net. Anywhere else we should look, or can we find everything there?
You can find everything there pretty much, but I'm on all the socials, at Iconic Speaker on Twitter, on IG. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. And so of course I do have the podcast called Iconic Mindset. I do that with a co-host named John Avola, and we're there on all of the platforms as well there. So you just type in Calvin Stovall, Iconic, it'll come up.
You'll be there. Well, I love it. Calvin, final question. You've already, offered a few of them in Damon John and John Maxwell, but we always ask, it's the Trusted Leader Show. Who is a leader you trust and why?
Yes, there is a guy that I know. His name is Jim Horsager. Jim was the brand leader or SVP for Homewood Suites when I was at Hilton. I'll never forget Jim, because Jim was iconic, particularly in how he led his people. He trusted us, and he let us try things that had never been done before, which is why I think Homewood was so successful. And of course, you had to make sure that the ideas that you brought were on strategy and all of that. But what was unique about Jim was that he was one of the best listeners. Talk about empathy in leadership. That was it. He embodied that. And he was just a unique guy. He actually runs Focus Brands now. But he's gone over to the food and beverage side of things. But he was just, I will always remember him, because he was just so different in his approach to leadership. He had everything that you talk about: the trust, the leadership, empowerment, all of those things. That was just him. And that's a guy, if you want to emulate a great leader, he was the one.
I love it.
He was the one. Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. It's been really fun to reconnect, Calvin, with you.
It has.
Yeah, even though you've flown the coop on Minnesotans. Lots of takeaways here today. A few of my favorites. You can copy the product, but not the experience. Focus on what you can control. Success is a barrier to innovation.
Yes.
And everybody now knows the framework for being iconic, be unique and authentic and passionate and consistent. Calvin, thanks for being on. This has been the Trusted Leader Show. Until next time, stay trusted.